Hello and welcome to Two Hopes Garage. My name's Jace. Thank you very much for joining us. Mercedes W126 content. It has been a long time coming and I must apologise. Seems during the summer I don't get much done in that car. Now that the autumn and winter weather's coming in again, I hope to be in the garage a lot more and my plans to recommission that Mercedes are reinvigorated. So heaps of content coming up for that. Apologies for the delay and thank you very much for your patience in waiting for the 126 content to come up, if you have been. It's quite a long video, it's chaptered, so you can skip straight to the bits you need, although as a tiny YouTube channel I would appreciate it if you watched the whole thing. However, you can skip to the bits you need. It's the removal, refurbishment and refitting of the power steering pump. A job that's definitely worthwhile doing. The kit cost me £7.51. It was a few years ago, so it's probably up a bit, but it's still cheap as chips. A refurbished pump, if you can get one, is hundreds of pounds. So, aye, well worth doing. Thank you to all the old subscribers, very much indeed, for bearing with us, and your patience is appreciated. And thank you very much to the new subscribers for joining us here at Two Hopes Garage. Once again, very much appreciated. Anyway, that's enough of my waffle. Straight in to the Mercedes W126 power steering pump video. Cheers. You can see there's a whole mess of oil leaking out. I suspect the leak is possibly from the O-ring at the bottom of the bowl where it goes into the pump housing. Obviously, stuff's tracking down here. However, there is stuff back here as well. So I think what I'm going to do while I'm waiting on other stuff getting done is we'll get this pump out and get it rebuilt. I'm going to clean this up here a wee bit before I start taking that apart. So first of all on this, I'm going to get the fan shrouds out. Now, these have been loosened off previously for when I was getting the transmission out. So, yeah, essentially, you'd unclip this hose from the top here, unclip the rear of the shroud from the front. The shroud is located, the front shroud is located in a couple of lugs down at the bottom with a couple of metal clips just at the top corners here. These just simply pull out with a wee bit of leverage from a screwdriver. Then we can get, with a bit of luck, our shroud out. There we go. Make sure I'm not snagging anything. That comes out nice and easily. And then we can take this bit straight out as well. Like so. That's just going to enable access a wee bit more easily onto the power steering pump pulley. And also, just down in between the power steering pump and whatever this pulley is, I'll put it up on the screen, hereish perhaps, hereish, is I believe it's a 19mm bolt for the belt tensioner. So we'll loosen that. In fact, you know what? I was going to loosen that off. However, I suspect if I do the pulley bolts first, while we've still got a little bit of resistance to that turning, I think that's going to work out better for me. I'm going to go with a 13. So it turned out they were actually 13. So we get 3 of them to come off. Okay, that's one. Right, let's see if we can do that one with a socket on it instead. Tensioner had been slackened off. I suspect I'd have been turning everything here, or at least slipping the pulley under the belt. So it's probably worth keeping that quite tight. We'll have a crack at loosening off the 19mm tensioner bolt. You can just see that there in between the two pulleys. I'm not going to film that getting loosened off from here because I can't get the tool and the camera in at the same time. So just to let you see what it is, getting on that bolt is officially classified as a wee bit fiddly. I expect this to be pretty tight. There we go. So we get a long handled ratchet on here. The manual says slacken it off about 1/4 to 1/2 a turn. So the next thing we're looking at undoing is this guy just here, and that slackens off the belt tensioner. The other one just releases it in order to slacken it off. This is the one that slackens it off. So I'll film that from a different angle, but yeah, we'll get on that with a 13mm ratchet handle and slacken the belt tension off a wee bit. So I've put a bit of cryo on this just to oil the machine a wee bit, and I believe it's a classic lefty loosey. Yeah, you can feel the belt tension going already, I think. Yeah, that all feels pretty slack. Right, so now we've got the tensioner slackened off and the bolts slackened off a wee bit on the pulley. Let's get the bolts whipped out and see if we can get the pulley off. Fantastic. Bolts are out. One on the floor, naturally. Let's see if we can give it all a wee shuggle. There we go. And grab our pulley. There we go. One pulley off. Okay, so I'd lost the audio at this point here. So I'm removing the 4 13mm bolts that hold the pump to the vehicle. This was the top one. It was pretty tight. I was on it with the small ratchet handle and the 13mm. That wasn't cutting it at all. So I got the big guns out and got the long-armed extension with the ratchet onto that. You actually see the whole engine moving with the force to get that undone. There we go. That's it undone, and proceed to slacken it off a wee bit and take it out with the smaller ratchet. Once we got that out, you'll find it's a long bolt going through into the housing, and there is a spacer just behind it. I'm not sure it comes up too readily here, but you'll see that later on. The next one was the one below that. There was a nut on the back of that, so that nut had to be held steady while I removed the bolt from the bottom of the pump. At this point here, a bit of fiddling about, but there we go. We've got the bolt out, there's the nut, and we'll put that away somewhere safe. So at the rear of the housing for the tensioner, there are a couple of bolts there. So this one here goes into the housing. It's I think it's kind of a medium length bolt here. Again, later on I'll show you the bolts and the positions. I've just left that sitting there just now. Slackening off the lines here. They were pretty tight. The bottom one particularly was an absolute pain. So what I had to do at this point, I got it started with a hammer. I had to then soak it in cryo. You can see me putting cryo in between the bolt and the fitting and the nut and the pipe even. A little bit on the threads, and likewise with the upper ones. The upper one didn't really give me too many issues at all. There we go, bit of cryo on the upper one, and we'll let that soak. Again, another wee bit between the union and the pipe. So once I get a cryo in there, they were allowed to soak for a wee while, and you see the top one comes away pretty easily once I get my arms out the way of the camera. There we go. That one came undone, no bother at all. As you can see, once it was started, that was just hand tight. The bottom one was particularly difficult. As you can see, I get on it with a pipe spanner here. I do manage to start this one after it had been soaking in cryo. Okay, but what I found was the union was seized on the pipe. I let that sit in cryo, used a bit of parts cleaner, as you can see here. That had to soak overnight, and we eventually got it moving. As you can see, the threads come out of the pump body at this point here. but there was a fair few hours of soaking involved with that one. Yours may or may not be the same. So as you can see here, that's the bottom pipe coming loose at last. I think that's it disconnected by this point here. Then we get the top one wheeled out the way. You can still see the bolt going into the housing at the top at the back there. Once I get those two pipes off, I whipped that bolt out. That was a medium length bolt, and to all intents and purposes that was me thinking that all the bolts holding the pump to the vehicle were out. The Mercedes manual only said there was two. However, I subsequently found another one that was securing it down at the bottom. That's a spacer coming out from one of the upper bolts. So at this point here, all four bolts securing the pump to the vehicle had been removed. So the last thing left to do at this point, on the back of the pump, there is a wee bracket that holds a wiring loom to the back of the pump. It is held on with a 13mm bolt. That bolt is captive within the bracket, so once that comes off, that just remains with the vehicle and we can get the pump removed. So that's it off there, and we'll get it wheeled out. It's pretty manky, so over to the bench, and we get the normal dialogue coming back in again, thankfully. So we'll give this a quick initial clean-up prior to disassembly. I'm going to use my new favourite trusty Sure Shot, and we'll get some brake and parts cleaner soaking in there. Oh, fantastic. Stuff's coming off already with minimal effort. So we get the ever elusive 10mm socket. I still don't quite get the 10mm socket thing, guys. I've not really had issues with 10mm sockets getting lost, but there you go. So we'll pop that off. Oh, there we go. So that just comes straight out. So you've got a spring, your plastic thing. I'll put the word up somewhere. 10mm nut on this tube here. Down inside, we've got our filter. I'll just get a set of pliers to get that out. Right, so down at the bottom there, we've got 3 E8 fasteners. One. Two. And 3. So these are likely to be different lengths, I think. So, no, not focusing. Apologies. Much quicker. There's that one there. Relatively quickly. There we are. All the same length, so that's grand. So hopefully, a bit of luck, that'll pop off. There we are. And we'll give that a run through the parts washer. So there's the fasteners for that there. There's the O-ring seal for the bottom of the bolt. I'll carefully take this out. It's a flat section now rather than an O-ring. So that's definitely going to have been given rise to some problems. There we go. Yeah, I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but that's flatter than a pancake, So that's been doing us no favours whatsoever. Right, next up I think we'll take the 4 bolts that hold the snout to the pump body. We'll take them off and get the innards of the pump exposed. These are 13 mils, I think. Yes, they are. So we'll go a bit medieval and give that a bit of a tap. One. 2. So upside down, do the ones in the bottom. So the two bottom bolts here are really quite tight. Am I going to need an extension? I'm going to need a little extension. I'm all for the labour saving devices, so let's just get the impact on it and give it a quick blast. Let's also make sure we're on remove. There we go. That makes life so much easier. And this one here. There we are. Less time mucking around with hitting spanners. So now that the bolts are out, I just realised I took those bolts out and the camera wasn't recording. They're all the same size, so not to worry about them. Now the bolts are out, we can take the snout of the pump off. Very carefully. There we are. Oh, there's a couple of O-rings there. So, what have we got in O-rings? Let's have a look. We've got an O-ring here. There we are, on that little port up there. This one has come from the housing down here. Another one in there, we'll get that out in a second. Pop this one off. Yeah, that's flat and not terribly effective at sealing things. Yeah, I'll go and poke a scalpel blade in that just to get it out. Being exceptionally careful, obviously. There we go. And again, flat as a pancake, so not doing grand. That's its sealing duties. So that's as far as I'm going with this portion of the pump here. Whoops. Now, onto this end. So we'll take this part off of the top of the vane pump. A couple of wee spigots there. This should just come away. Taking note of how it's positioned, we've got the number at 6 o'clock here relative to the small port just up here. So this should just lift off. Yep, there we go. So carefully pop that off. There we go. Pop that aside. Got a couple of wee spigots here. We'll leave them there for the moment. There's our vane pump inside. Now, I'm a firm believer in keeping each of those vanes in its respective housing because they have worn their way together for 30 odd years and I'm not about to divorce them and put them into another one. So we'll try and keep that lot together. What we do need to do, we've got a wee circlip here that holds the spindle for the snout on, and there is a seal underneath the snout there. So let's find ourselves a suitable set of circlip pliers and we'll see about taking that off. Jeez. This is a bit reluctant, but we'll get it out. It's going out, it just doesn't know it yet. I think because I've bent these pins, they're not wanting to do what they're meant to do. Not wanting to chew this circlip up too much either. That's us. There we go. So there's our circlip. I might look at getting a new one. We'll see. We'll see how it looks. Now that that spindle has been released, I'm able to take this vane pump out. Now, those wee vanes have been sitting in there in each one's housing quite happy for the last 30 odd years, and I do not want them falling out. Now, I've seen a couple of different ways of retaining these. I've seen people tape them. Personally, I think I'm just going to keep these together. I've also seen it put in a bit of kitchen roll or shop roll. So I think that's the way forward for me. Just fold them all up, keep them in situ, and keep them where they're meant to be. Right, so what I'm doing here is just taking these wee pins out here. There's one. And there's two. I'll try and get the vane off here. Taking the spindle out. Then very carefully I'll pop the spindle here. Okay, one of the vanes is out. That's not the end of the world because it's the only one that's out. What it's doing currently. There we go. Look, it was just sticking to the oil. Carefully sit that down there. See where our rogue vane's gone. There it is. The vane had fallen inside the snout. There we go. Fantastic. What I'm looking for here is just looking for the rounder, more worn edge. Like so. That looks good. Also remembering what way it was facing outwards, and it's with that little V on there. If I take that over, yeah, the other side doesn't have it, so that's the side we are wanting to see. Pop that aside. It's golden. So what we're looking to do, this is a seal here. We're looking to get rid of this seal here. Also, we'll take out this old O-ring. There we go. Again, the O-ring isn't very O. It's more flat and square. So we'll replace that. Alright, now that we've got everything cleaned up a bit, let's see if we can get this seal, the shaft seal off the snout with the old seal puller. Oh, that's surprisingly easy. Let's turn that down, around, pop it across from the other side. Oh, beautiful. I think we'll just get a wee bit of our power steering fluid or mineral oil on our finger. No, not ours, on my finger. Give that a wee lube in the middle there. That's the seal kit I got. I got this a few years ago and it was £7.51, which looking at the price of getting a new or refurbished pump is well worth it. So that's our little snout seal. You see there's a wee, I don't know if you can make it out. Oops, there is a wee wire in there, there we go. And that is just going to go in there. Oh, not too easily. Do you know what? I'll probably just tap that in. But I've got a press there and I'm tempted to use the press. However, let's just get a socket and tap that into place. 21. It's there or thereabouts, isn't it? That's about there. I think we're in. So now that everything's cleaned up, let's look at getting it all back together again. What I will be using is a wee film of power steering fluid over it. I think it's changed since the last time I had put new oil in it. There is what I'm using there. Febby 02615. I was looking for the old invoice to see what I'd used previously. I don't remember it. I remember it being a yellow colour. This stuff's clear, but this is apparently what's recommended. We'll put a wee smear of oil across there and we'll pop that in like so. So next up, let's pop our O-ring on. I've got a wee film of oil round here. We'll pop our big O-ring on, which has been suitably lubed. So next up is getting the dreaded vane assembly on. So the vane assembly's been sitting in here. I've had oil on there, although apparently the cloth's absorbed it. So I just need to get this onto there. It's probably easier said than done. I think I'll tip that out onto my hand. And bring this together like so. Tip it back again. That went reasonably smoothly. So this wee V marking here, I've had a photo of that and it lines up roughly in between these two. So once I put the spigot in for this, there are holes. Let's take this off. A little bit of stiction there. Yeah. So there are holes for the spigot around about here. Pop that in that way. There's a couple of wee wear marks that show that that was probably sitting just in about there. The other one should be lined up over there. Fantastic. It's important that this sits the right way around because these ports are required to port the oil in the right direction or something like that. So there's our circlip. This one's actually okay, so I'm going to reuse this again. I had a carry on with this earlier on, obviously if you've seen the video, because it's so small. So we'll see how we get on. Circlips are a bit fiddly at the best of times, but when they're this small, definitely a bit of a pain. Or snap rings to our American viewers. Do you know what? Let's just go down the route of shoving it on like so. There we go. That's easier. So next up, we'll pop the O-ring in this wee port here from our kit. Now, controversially, I've got a tiny wee bit of Vaseline in there. Take some of that out. Just to hold it in place while I put things together. I will be doing a flush later on the oil in this one. So, yeah, I figure we'll get rid of that. It's such a small amount, I think will be grand. And we'll pop this back on. I've made note that that sat at 6 o'clock earlier on in the video relative to that wee port up there. The other thing, and I don't know if the camera is going to pick this up, you see a little V there, and on the pump there you've got a wee V there. If it's in the right position, they should match up exactly, as you can see. So pop that on there. Then next thing is getting the rear of the pump. I'll just move this out the way and popping our two new O-ring seals in there. Again, just a tiny wee bit of Vaseline just to help keep them in place while I'm putting the thing back together. So one in there, like so, and the other one in there. So they'll be grand. So we've got our O-ring here. We've got a wee hair there, let's get rid of that. So we've got our it's not mine, that's for sure. We've got our O-ring around the body there. Pumps on, circlips on, this plate's on, and our little port O-ring seal is sitting in place there. So we'll just pop this rear of the pump on, matching the port with the port there. O-rings aren't falling out because they're held in with the Vaseline. And I'll just pop it on gently so as not to disturb the O-rings. Oops, that's springy, like so. Yeah, let's just check that O-ring now. It's still okay, they're still okay. So I'll just sit that on there for the moment. Flip this over. Again, taking care and keeping an eye on the wee O-ring there, which is still sitting in place. Let's push this together and getting our first bolts in. Let's do diagonal opposites for the meantime. Oops. There we go. So I don't have the torque figures for these bolts. They're grade 10-9 bolts. They're an M8. Generally that would give about a 41 Newton meter just generic torque for that grade of bolt. However, given that they're going into aluminium, admittedly through steel initially, but screwing directly into aluminium, I am going to go to about 20 Newton meters. I think for going into alley, it's about 18 to 22. I'll go in the middle and I'll take it up in stages. So I'll just go to 10 and then 22. And I'll just monitor it and see how it all goes. So there's 10. Right, so I torqued that up to 22 Newton meters just off camera in the vise there. Like I say, I couldn't find the official torque settings for that. However, 22 should be grand going into aluminium. If any of you guys know the proper torque settings, I would be very much obliged to you if you let me know. So I'm just going to pop the O-ring on here for the bowl. Once again, with a tiny bit of Vaseline, just to keep it nicely in place. Now, the bowl came with these E8 screws, or bolts, shouldered with no washer. The kit came with washers with a wee rubber seal in them. However, as it came from manufacturer with just these, I'm putting it back together with just these. If liquid does leak between the bolt hole and the base there, well, we've got that big O-ring round the outside to stop any liquid getting through. So I'm just going to put it back the way it came together and hope it's all good. Question is, can I remember what way it is it possible to put this together the wrong way? Oh, it is. That's not good. I seem to remember that's how that came apart. I've got a wee bit of rag just in there. Just to keep the screws in. So I'll tighten these ones up initially just by hand. There we go. Once again, I don't have the official torque settings for these E8 bolts, which are on an M6. So M6 going into aluminium should be looking about 9 to 12 Newton meters. So let's go for somewhere in between there and tighten it up to 10. And we'll go with that. In fact, let's do it in stages. Let's go 5 and then 10. So tighten these up. Like I say, these are just going into aluminium. You definitely don't want to be stripping this out. Pop it up to 10. I'll just lie it on its side for the moment. 1, 2, 3. 10 Newton meters on them. That'll do them. So next up, I'm going to fit a filter back into the bowl. Now, a few years ago, I fitted this particular filter here into the pump in anticipation of it running, and it never ran. So this has just sat in the oil, which then eventually leaked out and hasn't actually filtered anything. So to that end, I'm going to put this, maybe slightly controversially, back into the pump. When I get the car up and running again, I'm going to do a full power steering flush. After the flush has been done, I will remove this and put a nice new filter into our nice clean fluid. So we'll pop that in there. Pop our retainer back on, which has all been cleaned up. Easiest just to hold this down, take out some of the spring pressure, and make sure you can screw it in by hand so as not to cross thread it. I'll give it a little nip up with what we got. That looks like a wee 10mm socket. I'll pop that on there. Again, not going too wild. That'll do, just by hand. I'll pop our lid on for the moment, just to keep things clean in there. I'll not pop any oil in there just now. I'll pop the lid on for the moment. A nice sprung action. I have checked the seal on the lid and it looks to be good. And the lid's also been cleaned down. I'll pop our retainer on there for the moment. There we go. And we'll see about popping this back in the car. So I thought, as I struggled a bit with the bolts on the vehicle, and I don't think the initial removal shows a great idea where the bolts are. And indeed, the workshop manual only showed us what looked to be 2 bolts. I thought I'd run through the bolts on the pump for my setup anyway. Yours may be slightly different, especially if it's a left-hand drive. Obviously I've got a right-hand drive. Show you how the bolts are set up with it off the vehicle, and maybe if I'm clever during the editing phase, I'll show an image of where it goes on the vehicle with some kind of arrows, I might not be that clever, so this might just be a description of where they go. So looking from the front, so where you'd have your pulley attached to here, this would be the outboard where the wing is, or where the passenger wing is. This is inboard towards the engine. We've got a long bolt coming up on this arm here with a spacer, and that runs through into housing. Down below we've got a short bolt. Nope, we don't. We've got another long bolt with a nut on the end of it, and the nut you access obviously from the other side. A wee bit tricky to access that. Turning round to the back, up top just next to the longer bolt with the spacer, you have got this bolt here. I'll show you the length. That goes through where essentially this is coming in, so this shouldered portion here runs through this part of the I guess it's the belt tensioner, and then screws in to the back of the pump. Directly below that you've got a shorter bolt. It goes through a thinner part of the tensioner, hence it being shorter, and straight into the pump housing there. With a bit of luck, I've managed to show you where they go on the vehicle. I'll certainly film it going in, but how much of this you can see is, yeah, it's not great, just because of access. So we'll get the pump, and a bit of luck, excuse the hands, and that just sits in. So we'll go and get our bolts and start fastening this thing back onto the car. So this might not be the best image quality, but so your first bolt here is the upper one with the spacer that just goes into this part of the housing of the or part of the tensioner assembly. So we'll get that in hand tight initially, then we'll start popping the other ones in. Next up, with a wee bit of luck, you can see the one with the spacer that I've just popped in, and then just below that is the sort of medium length bolt with a washer, and that goes through the same housing that this one's coming through from the front. It goes through rear to front and into the back of the pump. So we'll get that one loosely started by hand as well, and then we'll move on to the other ones. So next up we'll get the bottom one on. That's the one with the nut on it. Notice you've got the belt tensioner here, then the body of the pump just sits behind that, and we'll look onto the back, and the nut will be going on the back. What you might need to do is give the pump a wee bit of a shuggle at this point to get these holes to line up. So going down to the back of the pump, might be able to see, and I'll try and put an arrow there, just where the nut is going on to that bolt. Next up, we'll get the one next to it. You can just see the hole there, and that's the final one with the shortest bolt. Looking down at the bottom there where the arrows are, you can see the nut and bolt and the shorter nut going into the back of the pump there. And that's the last of them. So what I'm going to do now is tighten them up and see if I can get a torque on any of those. It's not an ideal position for doing some good footage of it going in, but I'll just point out the bolts. So I'll get this one up here on the top, and this one down there on the bottom. The bolts get torqued to 25 Newton meters. I actually managed to get a torque wrench in that one, and I think it was a double depth I used down on that one. So I got both of them torqued up, no problem. Going over onto the other side. So looking down on the other side, I found it a bit of a struggle to get torqued up in here. So on this top bolt, I ended up just tightening that up with an offset 13mm ring spanner to what I thought was about 25 Newton meters. My torque wrench was a bit bulky to get in there. Looking down at the bottom, this bottom one, although I could tighten that one up with the ratchet handle and the 13mm single depth socket, the clearance between this plate here and this wasn't sufficient for me to get my torque wrench in. So again, that was just tightened up using the ratchet handle to good and tight in what seemed to be about 25 Newton meters. The nut on the bolt there, obviously when I was torquing up the front one to the 25 Newton meters, I just held that steady with, I think it was an offset spanner. So next up, I think we'll get the gloves off the hydraulic lines and we'll get them put back on again. On there off. So pop the top line in. And we'll pop the bottom one in. Excuse the arms there. Right, so let's get the pulley back on. I've got the holes up at 12 o'clock. I've got the hole up at 12 o'clock. We'll get this one up at 12. The tensioner's loosened off at the start of the job. I think what I'm going to do is just feed that back in and go the easy way, I hope, and pop that back on. Let's just rotate this round a little bit. Get the hole up to 12 where I need it. We're about there. We're about there. Beautiful. Now, this belt will be getting changed at some point. However, what we'll do now is I'll pop these back on, tension the belt up, check my belt is going where it's meant to go, across there, that's all sitting nicely, it's sitting on the tensioner, sitting on the pulleys nicely, that's G to G, so we'll get a 13mm on our tensioner doodah there, we'll get that tightened up a wee bit. Yep, we'll go with that for the moment. We'll tighten up our 19mm. For the moment, it's just back together roughly the way it was. So I'm not over concerned about the niceties with the belt for the moment. So I've got this wee wiring loom bracket, and that just bolts on to the corner of the pump, just there. Keeps all our wires out the way. Let's nip that up. Don't go too wild, because you're getting into aluminium, and we're grand at that. Fantastic. What I'm going to do just now is just put some fluid in here. See what happens with my seals. Hopefully they'll retain that fluid. I'll check again tomorrow. I'll pop the cap back on and check that these aren't leaking, shouldn't be. And the seals at the bottom of the bowl are holding as well, which hopefully they should be, or else I'm doing the whole rebuild thing all over again. So there you go, power steering pump is back on. Like I say, the belt's going to get changed. When I change that belt, I'll have a wee look at that tensioner, because the little guide indicator isn't where it should be. Yeah, so there'll be a new belt going on. We'll check out the tensioner. For the moment, Ordinarily you'd put the fan shroud back in. For the moment on this one, it's staying out. There's no reason for that to go back on at this point in time. So aye, that's it. Power steering pump rebuilt. The proof is in the pudding, and the pudding is quite some way away before I get this fired up again. Bearing in mind I will do a flush through of that fluid, do a full flush and get the old fluid out the rack as well, and or out the rack, doesn't have a rack, get the old fluid out this power steering box. Yeah, so that's that. Grand. So that's the power steering pump sorted. Quite what the next content coming up is, I'm not sure, but there's a lot of it for the Mercedes. I'm hoping it's going to be the front guide rod mounts. We'll get them back in. I've also got the lower ball joint replacement to get sorted out. That's been sitting at the side of the garage waiting on my attention. Whatever it is, there will be lots of content to come. Aye, thanks once again for joining us. All the best. Hope to see you again soon. Cheers.